Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, welcome, come in, get comfortable. Tonight we're doing something a little different from the usual, or maybe not that different at all depending on how long you've been watching this channel. We're taking something that the internet has been in a complete state about for roughly the past 24 hours, and we're slowing it down. We're sitting with it. We're turning it over and examining it from every angle the way you would with something genuinely interesting, without any of the urgency or the shouting or the 3-minute rapid-fire YouTube edit that makes your brain feel like it's being chased. The thing in question is the first full-length trailer for Avengers Doomsday. And if you missed the news, it's only dropped yesterday as part of a presentation at CinemaCon in Las Vegas. So this is about as fresh as it gets. The ink is barely dry, the takes are still forming, and I thought, rather than rush out something loud about it, I'd sit down tonight and just talk through it properly. Everything the trailer showed, everything it reminded us of, where it all came from, what it means for the films that are coming. That's the whole plan. No countdown, no ranking, just a long, comfortable walk through one of the most anticipated pieces of marketing in the history of a franchise that's been running for nearly 2 decades now. We'll start with the trailer itself, what it opened on, what it saved for last, which moments made the room applaud. Then we'll spend some time on the characters involved, on the people playing them, on what all of this has been building towards since 2019. There's a lot of history here, and the history is honestly the best part. The trailer is a few minutes long. The story behind it is about 60 years old if you count the comics, and about 17 if you count the films. I'll also spend a good stretch talking about Dr. Doom himself, because he is one of the great comic book characters of all time, and he's never really been done justice on screen before now. That changes with this film, and it's worth understanding why he matters so much before we even talk about who's playing him. There'll also be some time given to Steve Rogers coming back, to what the X-Men being in this universe finally means, to the Fantastic Four arriving as if they've always been here, to Thor catching a hammer that then flies away from him, which is frankly one of the most satisfying images I've heard described in a Marvel trailer in years. So, get yourself sorted. There is genuinely a lot to cover, and all of it is worth taking slowly. Lights down, blanket up, phone face down, or on the other side of the room if you're trying to actually sleep tonight. This is going to take a while, and that's completely the point. One small thing before we dive in: if you find these long, slow breakdowns helpful for winding down, it means a lot when you subscribe. There's a button somewhere below this video. You don't have to, obviously, but it helps keep the channel going, and there's quite a bit more of this kind of thing planned, especially once the actual film comes out in December. For now though, let's start where the trailer starts, because the first image Marvel chose to open their biggest film in years is a genuinely surprising one, and it tells you almost everything about what Doomsday is trying to be. One other thing worth saying before we get going: I'm working from press descriptions of this trailer tonight, not a recording. The footage was shown in a private room at CinemaCon, and journalists were not allowed to film it. What we have are written accounts from people who were in that room, from Variety, from The Hollywood Reporter, from IGN, and Entertainment Weekly, and a handful of others. So when I describe what the trailer looks like, I'm painting from their words rather than watching it myself, which is honestly a bit of a strange way to talk about a trailer. Normally, you just watch the thing, but there's something kind of nice about it too, having to imagine the images based on someone else's description. Your brain fills in the gaps, you make your own version of it. By the time the public trailer actually drops, it'll be interesting to see what matches and what doesn't. So we're working with good information, carefully sourced, and where I'm speculating or extrapolating, I'll say so. Everything described directly comes from the journalists who were in that room. With that said, let's begin. CinemaCon is not a fan event. That's the first thing to understand about it, because the word convention makes people picture queues and cosplay and panels with actors taking questions from enthusiastic people in the cheap seats. CinemaCon is nothing like that. It's a trade conference. It's held every year at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. And the audience is theatre owners, the people who run multiplexes and cinema chains, the exhibitors who decide how many screens a given film opens on and how prominently it gets promoted to actual ticket-buying audiences. Studios attend CinemaCon to court those people. They show footage, they bring talent on stage, they make the case that their upcoming films are worth prioritising. It's part business pitch, part premiere, and it operates almost entirely away from the public eye. What gets shown there stays there, at least in theory. No recording is permitted. Journalists can attend and describe what they see, but the footage itself doesn't leave the room, which makes it a genuinely interesting choice of venue for the world premiere of the most anticipated trailer in years. Marvel, Disney, Kevin Feige, they could have put this online at midnight to 100 million views. They chose to show it first in a room of a few hundred cinema executives in Las Vegas, people who can't record it, people who will go home and make decisions about how many screens to allocate to a film opening on the 18th of December. It's partly practical. The theatre industry has had a rough few years, and having a room full of exhibitors leave a presentation convinced that Avengers Doomsday is going to be the biggest film of 2026 has real financial value. It's also partly theatre, the literal kind. The choice to make an event of the first trailer, to have Robert Downey Jr. walk out on stage, personally, to introduce the footage, creates a story about the trailer that goes around the internet before anyone has seen a single frame. And that's exactly what happened. Variety's story about the CinemaCon presentation was picked up everywhere, not because they described the footage, they did carefully, but because the headline wrote itself. Robert Downey Jr. walked into CinemaCon as Dr. Doom, introduced the first full Doomsday trailer, and then asked for it to be played a second time, because the crowd reaction was that good. Marvel knew what they were doing. They've been doing this a long time. It's also worth noting that this wasn't the first time we'd seen anything from Doomsday. The film had 4 teasers released before this trailer, each of them brief, around a minute and a half, attached to screenings of Avatar: Fire and Ash back in December 2025. Each teaser focused on a different group of characters, one for Steve Rogers, one for Thor, one for the X-Men, one for the Fantastic Four, each one essentially a calling card, a proof of concept, designed to answer the question everyone had been asking since the original announcement. Are these characters actually all in the same film, or is this just clever marketing? They're all in the same film. The CinemaCon footage was the first time anyone saw them sharing a screen in any meaningful way, and by the accounts of everyone who was in that room, the experience of watching it, of seeing Gambit and Shang-Chi in the same shot, of seeing Thor rally characters from 6 different franchises, of seeing that specific Mjolnir moment we'll get to shortly, was exactly as overwhelming as you'd imagine. Chris Evans was also on that stage, which matters. He had not publicly addressed his return to the franchise until this event. Since Endgame, Evans has consistently said he felt Tony and Steve's story was complete, that he wouldn't come back just for the sake of it. For him to show up in person at CinemaCon, stand next to Robert Downey Jr. and say out loud that there is a real reason for Steve Rogers to be in this film, that's not a small thing. That's an actor who means it. The public trailer hasn't been released online yet as of recording. Marvel will attach it to something theatrical in the coming weeks, most likely. Until then, what we have are the journalist descriptions from that room, which are detailed and consistent, and the footage from Robert Downey Jr. arriving on stage, which is freely available because the cameras were on him personally, not on the screen. All of which is to say, there's plenty to talk about. Let's start at the beginning of the trailer. The very first image in the Doomsday trailer is not an Avenger. It's not Tony Stark, not Steve Rogers, not Thor standing dramatically on a cliff somewhere. It's not even a Marvel Studios logo fading into something cosmic. The trailer opens on a sign for the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning, sitting in front of a grand old building with manicured grounds and the kind of quiet permanence that only very well-funded educational establishments manage to project. And then Patrick Stewart's voice begins. Something is coming. Something we might not be able to deter. Before this day is done, we shall be faced with an unthinkable decision. We see him at a window, Charles Xavier, looking out at the sky where a rift of fire is opening. He is afraid. Not panicked. Xavier is rarely panicked, but genuinely, visibly afraid. And then the trailer cuts to Doctor Doom. The choice to open there rather than anywhere else is a statement. Marvel has been introducing the X-Men into the MCU carefully, in pieces, for a few years now. But beginning the Avengers franchise's biggest film since Endgame, with the X-Mansion sign and Charles Xavier's voiceover, is a different kind of declaration. It says, the X-Men aren't guests arriving late to someone else's party. They're here first. The party's in their house. Patrick Stewart has been playing Charles Xavier since the year 2000. That's a long time by any measure. Long enough that for many people who love these characters, his voice is simply the voice of Xavier. Calm, measured, carrying the weight of someone who has spent decades trying to prepare the world for exactly the kind of thing it insists on being unprepared for. He appeared in the MCU once before this, briefly, in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness in 2022. He was part of the Illuminati, a council of powerful beings from an alternate universe, and that appearance lasted about 10 minutes before things went badly for everyone involved. It was a cameo, essentially, a fan service moment dressed up as plot. This is different. Marvel clearly chose to spend the first beats of their biggest trailer on Stewart and the X-Mansion, which suggests Xavier's role in Doomsday is more than a brief appearance. He's functioning as the moral voice of the opening, the one character whose reaction to the coming threat establishes the scale of it. If Charles Xavier, who has spent his entire life preparing for threats to mutant kind, looks that worried, the thing coming is genuinely serious. The X-Men have been a strange absence in the MCU for years. When Marvel Studios started in 2008 with Iron Man, the X-Men and the Fantastic Four were owned by Fox, not Disney, and there was no path to using them. The Fox X-Men films ran from 2000 through 2019, a separate franchise with its own continuity. Or several continuities, frankly, since that series had some timeline complications that even the films themselves acknowledged with varying degrees of success. Disney acquired Fox in 2019, which brought the rights back. But absorbing the X-Men into the MCU was never going to be simple. You can't just have Professor Xavier wander into an Avengers film and expect the audience to do all the work of reconciling two different fictional universes. It had to be handled carefully, and Marvel has been building toward it slowly, introducing individual mutants, threading the concept of mutation into existing storylines before committing to the full ensemble. Now, with Doomsday, they're committing. The Xavier Institute opening isn't just fan service, it's an architectural choice, a way of saying that the X-Men's world and the Avengers world exist on equal footing in this film. The movie walks into Xavier's building before it walks into anything else. What's interesting about the confirmed X-Men cast is that Marvel has brought back the Fox actors rather than recasting. Patrick Stewart's Xavier, Ian McKellen's Magneto, Rebecca Romijn's Mystique, James Marsden's Cyclops, Alan Cummings' Nightcrawler, Kelsey Grammer's Beast, Channing Tatum as Gambit, a character who has been trying to get a solo film made for about 15 years and never quite managed it, through no fault of the performers. The decision to use these particular actors is interesting on a few levels. These are the versions of the characters that audiences grew up with. The 2000 X-Men film was genuinely influential. It helped establish that superhero films could be taken seriously, that there was an audience for them outside of children, that the genre had room for actual emotional weight. Bringing those actors back for this is a way of honouring that lineage rather than erasing it. It also means the film is leaning into the multiverse concept genuinely. These aren't the MCU versions of the X-Men arriving as if they'd always been here. They're the Fox versions from a different universe brought into this one because of whatever is happening with Doom and the rifts and the unthinkable decision Xavier is already worrying about at the top of the trailer. The multiverse isn't just a narrative device in this film, it's the mechanism by which 20 years of superhero films get to share a screen. And it starts with a sign outside a school and an old man looking at the sky. Right after Xavier turns from the window, the trailer gives us Doom. Not in full yet. Not the iron mask, not the imposing totality of the character. Just a profile shot, a figure in a green cloak with part of his face visible, the hood casting a shadow. The deliberate restraint of a first look that knows it doesn't need to show everything at once. The trailer is, according to Variety's description, titled The Trailer of Doom by Marvel internally, and even in this first glimpse it's clear they've thought carefully about how to reveal him. Later in the same trailer, Robert Downey Jr. appears unmasked as Victor Von Doom, then later still, in full iron mask during the confrontation with Thor. It's a 3-stage introduction compressed into a few minutes. The silhouette, the face, the armour. Each stage a different aspect of the same character. The mystery, the man, the symbol. The green cloak matters more than it might seem. Doom's look in the comics is iconic precisely because of its combination of elements. The flowing green robe, the iron mask and armour beneath it. The way he manages to look simultaneously like a medieval monarch and a science fiction robot and a dark wizard, all at once. No previous film version got this right. The 2005 film put him in armour. The 2015 version went in a completely different direction. This version, from the trailer description, appears to have actually committed to the comic book design in a way that should please everyone who spent years watching adaptations quietly sand away the character's most distinctive features. Joe Russo spoke about Doom at the CinemaCon presentation. He described Victor as one of the most complex Marvel characters and said he's always 3 moves ahead. Those words are carefully chosen. They tell you what kind of villain this film is building. Not a force of nature like Thanos, whose motivation was terrible, but at least comprehensible as a worldview. Something more considered than that. Someone who has a plan, and whose plan is already further along than anyone else realises. The casting of Robert Downey Jr. in this role is something we'll come back to at length in a later section, because it deserves its own space. But the short version is this. Marvel spent a year after the announcement having to defend the decision, answer questions about whether it was simply nostalgia, whether it was cynical, whether bringing back the face of Iron Man as a villain was a creative choice or a marketing one. The trailer seems designed, at least in part, to answer that question by showing you the character before reminding you of the actor. The profile shot, the green cloak, the voice. These read as Doom first. The unmasked reveal comes second. The ordering matters. Kevin Feige said something at CinemaCon that's worth sitting with. He said, Doomsday picks up where Avengers Endgame left off. Not where Phase 5 left off. Not where the most recent Disney Plus show left off. Endgame specifically. The suggestion is that Doom is a consequence of something that happened in 2019. That the events of Endgame, the time travel, the snap being undone, the fracturing of the timeline, created a situation that Victor Von Doom has been watching and preparing for. He's not a new threat that appeared from nowhere. He's a response to something. What exactly that means narratively isn't confirmed yet. The plot of Doomsday is genuinely under wraps, which is somewhat remarkable given how many people are involved in making it and how long the promotional window has been. But the framing of Doom as someone who has been watching and positioning himself while the Avengers thought the crisis was over, that's interesting. It suggests patience as much as power. He waited for the right moment. The trailer shows him preparing to invade the multiverse, according to the press descriptions. Not attack Earth specifically, not seek a particular object or weapon. The multiverse, the full scope of all possible reality, which is either an enormous plan or an enormous problem, depending on whether you're Victor Von Doom or everyone else. What I find genuinely compelling about this introduction is the restraint of it, the profile shot, the single line of voiceover, the cut to action. Marvel has spent years making trailers that try to show you everything, that pack in as many heroes, as many money shots, as many quick cuts as possible, to create a kind of sensory excitement that dissipates almost immediately. This trailer, by the accounts of everyone who saw it, doesn't do that. It opens slowly. It lets images breathe. The Doom introduction is a pause before the chaos, a moment of stillness that tells you who the movie belongs to. That's a storytelling choice as much as a marketing one. It says, this is his film. Everyone else is responding to him. Victor Von Doom was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in 1962. He first appeared in Fantastic Four issue 5, which is very early in Marvel's publishing history, early enough that the company itself was barely 2 years old in its modern form. The character was an instant hit with readers, which is saying something given that he arrived without an origin story. Lee and Kirby didn't explain where Doom came from for another 2 years. They just put him on the page and let his presence do the work. He had that quality even without backstory, the sense of someone who had been around a very long time and intended to be around a great deal longer. The origin, when it came, in Fantastic Four Annual Number 2 in 1964, is genuinely one of the richer villain backstories in superhero comics. Not complicated in the way that some origin stories are complicated, where you need a flowchart to track what happened to whom and when. Rich in the sense that it's emotionally coherent. You understand exactly how Victor Von Doom became what he is, and while you would never agree with his choices, you can follow the logic of them from the inside. He was born in Latveria, a small fictional country in Eastern Europe. The kind of country that exists in comic books and early 20th century spy novels, tucked between larger powers that have historically not been particularly kind to it. His mother was a woman who made a bargain with a demon. The details of why are more poignant than they might sound. She was trying to protect her people, and the bargain worked until it didn't. She died for it. Her soul was taken by the demon Mephisto as payment, and young Victor grew up knowing that his mother was suffering somewhere in a dimension he couldn't reach. His father, a brilliant healer, was called to treat a king's ill wife in the middle of winter. He dressed Victor in his own coat to keep the boy warm before leaving. He died of exposure on the journey back, having given away the warmth he needed to survive. Victor was left entirely alone. What he had in the absence of family and in the absence of security was intelligence. An extraordinary, almost supernatural intelligence. He was gifted with science, with engineering, with a natural affinity for magical theory that he inherited from his mother's artifacts and books. A scholarship to State University in New York brought him to America, and it was there that he met Reed Richards for the first time. The relationship between Doom and Reed Richards is the engine of Doom's entire story, and it's worth understanding correctly because it's often misrepresented. They weren't friends who became enemies. They were rivals almost from the beginning. Two exceptional intellects in the same space, each aware of the other, each forming a judgment. Reed recognized Victor's gifts. Victor recognized Reed's. But Victor believed, and has never stopped believing, that he was the superior mind, not by a small margin, by a significant one. The rivalry was never quite symmetric. The experiment is where things went irreparably wrong. Victor was working on a device to contact his mother's soul, to find her wherever Mephisto had taken her, and eventually to free her. Reed looked at the calculations and pointed out what he believed was an error. Victor ignored this. He considered the observation an insult disguised as help, a suggestion that he could make mistakes, which his ego could not accommodate. He proceeded with the experiment. The device exploded. Victor was scarred on his face, not severely. The account suggests the scar was minor, cosmetic, the kind of thing most people would not have noticed or would have learned to live with. But Victor could not live with it. He blamed Reed for not stopping him, which requires a particular quality of self-deception that is, in its own way, fascinating. Reed had tried to stop him. Victor had declined. But accepting that truth would require Victor to accept that he had made a mistake, and that was impossible. He had a mask made, iron, shaped to fit his face, and had it pressed against his skin before it had fully cooled, deliberately, so that the metal would sear him and the mask would become part of him. There are different interpretations of why he did this. The most interesting one is that it was a form of control, better to define your own disfigurement than to live with one imposed by chance. The scar was an accident, the mask was a choice. He returned to Latveria, deposed its government, and became its king. Not a metaphorical king, an actual monarch, with an army, with a parliament that exists largely to agree with him, with a citizenry that is, and this is important, genuinely well cared for. Latveria under Doom is an extremely good place to live, provided you are a citizen of Latveria. Schools, healthcare, clean streets, technological infrastructure, far beyond what any nation that small should be able to maintain. Doom is a tyrant, but he's a competent one, and his people know the difference between their own safety and the chaos that surrounds other countries. The combination of science and sorcery is his defining edge. Reed Richards can, in some areas, outthink him scientifically. Doctor Strange outmatches him in pure magical theory, but neither of them can do both at once, and Doom can. He built his armour himself. He taught himself the mystic arts from his mother's books. He refuses to be bounded by the rules of any single discipline, which means that any hero who approaches him as purely a scientific problem or purely a magical one is already working with incomplete information, and he is always 3 moves ahead. That's not hyperbole, it's a consistent character trait across 6 decades of comics. Doom's plans have backup plans. His backup plans have contingencies. He will sometimes lose a battle deliberately because losing that specific battle is part of winning the war. He is the character that other characters consistently underestimate, and he relies on that. He finds it almost relaxing. His motivation, underneath all the grandiosity, is quite simple. He believes that the world would be better governed by the most capable mind available, and he believes, without meaningful self-doubt, that he is that mind. He's not wrong about everything. He's saved the world more times than most heroes have. Usually quietly, usually without credit, because credit isn't what he's after. What he's after is order, structure, a universe that runs according to a plan, rather than stumbling forward on hope and improvisation. He would find the Avengers exhausting if he gave them much thought. 3 times, Doctor Doom has been put on screen in live action 3 times before this, and none of them quite got it. It's not that the films were without merit exactly, or well, in one case it is exactly that, but the character kept getting simplified in ways that made him lesser, flatter, more straightforwardly villainous, and less interestingly complicated. The first attempt was Julian McMahon in the 2005 Fantastic Four film. McMahon is a perfectly good actor, and there's a watchable film somewhere in that 2005 production, but the version of Doom he was asked to play was essentially a corporate villain. Victor Von Doom as a slick tech CEO type, who got powers at the same time as the Fantastic Four, and became their nemesis as a result. The movie turned him into a 5th member of the group who went wrong, rather than a figure who had been building toward this confrontation his entire life. The magic was gone entirely. Latveria barely featured. The Iron Mask arrived in the 3rd act as an afterthought. It was an origin story that left out most of the origin. The 2007 sequel, Rise of the Silver Surfer, continued along those lines. McMahon came back, the mask came back, and there was a bit more going on with the character, but the foundation hadn't changed. Without the Romani background, without the demon bargain, without the death of his parents, without the aching, complicated history with Reed Richards. It's hard to make Doom mean anything. He becomes just a man in armour who is cross about something. The 2015 reboot is the one that people struggle to defend. Toby Kebbell played a character named Victor in a film that approached the whole story from an entirely different angle. Victor, as a computer programmer, the FF's powers coming from a trip to a mysterious parallel dimension. His transformation into a creature that's genuinely alien and visually striking, but has almost no relationship to the character in the source material. Creatively brave, maybe, but so far removed from what makes Doom compelling that it doesn't really count as an adaptation of the same character. What all three versions have in common is that they stripped out the thing that makes Doom interesting, the genuine conviction that he is right. Doom is not a villain who knows he's a villain. He's a man who has looked at the world honestly, which is more than most people do, and concluded that the chaos and suffering he sees are the result of lesser minds being in charge of things they can't manage. His plan to fix that is monarchist and authoritarian and would involve quite a lot of people having no choice about anything, but it comes from a place of actual care for humanity in the abstract. He wants order, he wants people to be safe, he just also wants to be the one who ensures that. That nuance never made it onto screen before. Every previous version simplified him into personal grievance. He hates Reed Richards, he wants power, he wants revenge. Those things are part of the character, but they're not the whole of it, and a Doom built only on grudges is a smaller Doom than the one in the comics. What makes the 2026 version interesting before we've even seen the film is that Joe Russo's description, always 3 moves ahead, one of the most complex Marvel characters, suggests they've gone back to the source and read the character properly. The Russo brothers have a consistent track record of taking Marvel characters seriously on their own terms. Winter Soldier gave Captain America a genuinely political thriller. Civil War asked hard questions about the cost of autonomy versus accountability. Infinity War made Thanos sympathetic enough that audiences momentarily weren't sure they were rooting against him. A Doom in that tradition, considered, patient, certain of his own rightness, acting from a place of principle rather than just appetite, would be something the franchise has never managed before, and would, frankly, be worth waiting 2 decades for. Endgame came out in April 2019. The last shot of it was Tony Stark's funeral, followed by a quiet moment with an older Steve Rogers sitting by a lake, having returned from the past after living out his whole life with Peggy Carter. It felt like a full stop, not just the end of a film, but the end of something larger. A chapter, a phase, a particular way of telling stories that had worked so well for so long that nobody was quite sure what came next. What came next was 6 years of finding out. The MCU didn't slow down after Endgame. If anything, it accelerated, expanding into Disney Plus series, introducing new characters at a rate that some viewers found thrilling and others found exhausting. WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, She-Hulk, The Marvels. There were phases of it where it felt like Marvel was releasing something new every 3 weeks, and the obligation to keep up with all of it before the next film became its own source of low-level anxiety for certain kinds of fans. Some of it was genuinely excellent. WandaVision did something genuinely strange and moving with Wanda Maximoff, building a story about grief and denial through the structural grammar of sitcoms, which should not have worked as well as it did. Loki introduced the Time Variance Authority, the concept of the sacred timeline, and a villain called He Who Remains, the being who had been quietly controlling the direction of all history from the end of time, played by Jonathan Majors in a performance that was fascinating while it lasted. Both series were necessary viewing for understanding how the multiverse works in this universe. Loki Season 2 ended with its main character, after exhausting every other option, choosing to hold the branches of the multiverse together himself. Literally. Loki sits on a throne at the end of time, holding threads of causality in his hands, sustaining the existence of every timeline by sheer force of will. It's a sacrificial ending that redeems a character who began his MCU story trying to enslave humanity for his own ego. Tom Hiddleston is confirmed in Doomsday, which raises the question of what happens when the person holding everything together is needed somewhere else. The Thunderbolts is the most immediate predecessor to Doomsday in narrative terms. It introduced a team of morally complicated characters, Yelena Belova, Bucky Barnes, Ghost, Red Guardian, US Agent, and eventually Sentry, who end up being referred to in Doomsday as the New Avengers. Its post-credits scene is the thing that directly set up this film. The Fantastic Four's ship crosses from their universe into the MCU. The team visible inside it, no explanation offered, no context given. Just arrival. That moment was deliberate. Marvel has done this before, seeded a sequel in a post-credits scene with just enough information to confirm that something is coming without telling you what it is. But the Fantastic Four arrival carried more weight than most, because audiences had been waiting for these characters to show up in the MCU for years. The Fox rights situation had kept them separate for so long that their absence in the MCU felt like a holes in the furniture, a space where something should be, but wasn't. The Fantastic Four, First Steps, released earlier in 2026, told their origin story in their own universe before that arrival. Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, the most elastic mind in the Marvel universe, and, in the comics, the man with whom Doom has the oldest and most complicated rivalry. Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, whose force field abilities place her among the most powerful heroes in the franchise. Johnny Storm and the Thing completing the family. Their story in First Steps was entirely self-contained, set in a retro-futurist version of the 1960s in their own dimension. Doomsday is where they land in the present-day MCU and have to figure out where they are and what's happening around them. The Fantastic Four, as newcomers to a world already in crisis, is a compelling dynamic. And Reed encountering a Doctor Doom in this universe, who may share his face, but is not the victor he knew, is presumably one of the central tensions of the story. All of this is what Feige meant by saying Doomsday picks up where Endgame left off. Not literally, 6 years of story have happened in between, but the spirit of it. The core Avengers, the ones who fought Thanos, the ones who snapped and sacrificed and survived, are being called back because what's coming requires that specific group. The newer generation alone isn't enough. The world needs the people who've already been tested in the worst possible way. There's something quietly comforting about that framing, actually. The idea that experience matters, that having survived the hardest thing is its own form of preparation for the next hard thing. The Avengers have been through Infinity War and Endgame. Whatever Doom is doing, they've seen worse. Maybe, after Endgame, Anthony and Joe Russo left Marvel. Not dramatically, not after a falling out. They just left, the way you do when you've completed something enormous and need to go and do something else for a while. They made The Grey Man for Netflix, which starred Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans in a globe-trotting action film that was fine, polished, watchable, and not especially memorable. They made Citadel, a spy series for Amazon Prime. Good television, reasonably successful. The work of two filmmakers with strong technical instincts, applying those instincts to different material. But they clearly hadn't finished with Marvel, or Marvel hadn't finished with them, because at San Diego Comic-Con in 2024, the announcement came: the Russo brothers were returning to direct Avengers, Doomsday and Avengers, Secret Wars. 2 films, back-to-back, the same structure as Infinity War and Endgame. The Multiverse Saga closing the same way the Infinity Saga closed, with the directors who had the most experience doing it. The choice makes a particular kind of sense when you think about what Doomsday is trying to accomplish. The Russos, across their 4 MCU films, developed a specific skill: making large ensembles feel coherent. Captain America. The Winter Soldier worked because every character in it felt necessary. Civil War had nearly every MCU hero at that point, and still managed to feel intimate because the conflict was personal. Infinity War juggled 3 separate storylines across multiple planets and made it feel earned rather than scattered. The screenwriting team reflects the same logic. Stephen McFeely co-wrote The Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. He knows these characters' voices better than almost anyone working in Hollywood. He understands the emotional architecture of the franchise. What Thor sounds like when he's trying to hide how much something hurts. What Steve Rogers sounds like when he's made a decision he knows is right, regardless of what anyone else thinks. What it takes to make a scene between 2 heroes arguing about ideology feel genuinely meaningful rather than just dramatically convenient. Michael Waldron created Loki. That matters enormously for a film about the multiverse. Waldron wrote the rules of how time and alternate universes work in this franchise. He built the TVA, designed the logic of the branching timelines, wrote He Who Remains as a character who could explain enormous abstract concepts while still being interesting to watch. If Doomsday is partly about the consequences of all those branching timelines, Waldron is exactly the right person to be in the room. What the combination of Russos plus McFeely plus Waldron gives you is both the emotional lineage and the multiverse mechanics, handled by the people who invented them respectively. McFeely grounds things in character, Waldron handles the conceptual. The Russos shoot both in a way that makes them feel like the same film. At CinemaCon, Joe Russo talked about Doom in terms that confirmed they've thought carefully about how not to repeat the mistakes of previous adaptations. He emphasized complexity. He emphasized that Doom is not simply a villain. Always 3 moves ahead. That's a specific creative direction. It means the film is built around a character whose intelligence the audience will be asked to respect, even while opposing what he's doing. That's harder to write than a straightforward monster. It's also considerably more interesting to watch. There's something worth noting about the timing of their return too. Marvel has had a genuinely difficult stretch in the post-Endgame years, creatively and commercially. Several Phase 5 films underperformed. Some of the Disney Plus output received mixed responses. The franchise was showing the strain of trying to tell too many stories simultaneously, of asking audiences to invest in too many new characters before any of them had earned the same affection as the originals. The decision to bring back the directors who made the 2 highest-grossing films in franchise history is an acknowledgement of that strain, and a bet that the audience who drifted will come back for something that feels like the franchise at its best. From what the CinemaCon trailer apparently suggests, if the room reaction is any guide, that bet is looking reasonable. Before we get to Steve Rogers, because that moment deserves its own section, and it's going to get one, there's something quieter in the trailer worth slowing down for. A prayer. IMDb has listed a quote from the film attributed to Thor, and it reads like this: "Father, all my life I have answered every call, to honour, duty, to war. Now fate has given me something I never sought, a child, a life untouched by the storm. Lend to me the strength of the All-Fathers, so that I might fight once more, defeat one more enemy, and return home to her, not as a warrior but as warmth, to teach her not battle but stillness, the kind I never knew. Please, Father, hear my words." Whether or not that specific speech appears in the trailer, it tells you something significant about where Thor is in this film. He is a father now. He has a daughter, unnamed so far, but apparently a significant part of his emotional reality in Doomsday. The man who spent the Endgame years in a depressive spiral, who lost his mother and his father, and his brother, and his people, and his faith in himself over the course of multiple films. now has something specific to fight for. Not the abstract protection of the 9 realms, not the idea of duty or honor. A child. A particular child who doesn't know yet what storms feel like. That prayer to Odin, to a father who died whose absence is still felt, is one of those character beats that the MCU does well when it tries. Thor's relationship with his father has always been complicated. He spent years chasing Odin's approval, years learning to live without it, years making peace with the fact that Odin was both a genuinely great king and a genuinely flawed parent. Praying to him now, asking for the strength to come home, is a different kind of relationship with that memory. Not asking for validation, asking for help. In the trailer itself, the beat we have confirmed is Thor rallying the assembled heroes against Doom. He says, "Mark my words, we are going to need a miracle." Chris Hemsworth has been playing this character for 15 years, since 2011's Thor, and one of the genuinely impressive things about the franchise's handling of the character is that he's changed more significantly than almost any other Avenger over that time. He went from a somewhat arrogant demigod learning humility in the first film, to a character processing grief on a cosmic scale in Infinity War and Endgame, to a father. The rally moment in the trailer positions him as the one holding the group together before the arrival of the person who will actually change everything. He's already in command, he's already asking for the impossible. And then, off-screen, someone answers him. There's also something worth noting about the Doomsday trailer coming after Thor, Love and Thunder, which received a mixed response from audiences and critics. That film tried to be a comedy as much as a superhero film, and the tonal balance didn't quite work for a lot of people, myself included if I'm being honest. Hemsworth is genuinely very funny, but Love and Thunder let that quality run a bit unchecked, and the emotional moments, and there were real ones, particularly around the character of Gore the God Butcher, got somewhat buried. The version of Thor in the Doomsday trailer, based on that prayer alone, feels like a corrective, quieter, more serious, a man with something specific to lose who has therefore stopped making quite so many quips about it. At some point during the trailer, journalists place it in the middle third, after the initial Doom introduction and before the Steve Rogers sequence. Thor and Doom face off directly. Doom is in full iron mask. Thor comes at him. Doom catches Mjolnir with his bare hand, not blocks, catches, holds it. The hammer stops. Doom holds it like an object that has inconvenienced him slightly. This is the image from the trailer that seems to have produced the most immediate, visceral reaction in that Las Vegas room. And it's easy to understand why. Mjolnir operates on the principle of worthiness. It can only be lifted by those who are deemed worthy, which in the films has been used as a shorthand for a particular kind of moral character. Thor, Steve Rogers, memorably, in Endgame, the hammer as a test that only the right kind of person can pass. Doom doesn't pass the test. He doesn't need to. He holds it by force of will and power, which is an entirely different thing, and in some ways a more impressive one. The worthy can lift Mjolnir, but it takes something else entirely to simply stop it. In the comics, the list of characters who have directly resisted or restrained Mjolnir is quite short, and the names on it are consistently beings of enormous power or will. Dr. Doom appearing on that list in the trailer is a deliberate visual statement. This villain is operating at a scale that the Avengers don't normally encounter. Thanos in Infinity War had the same grammar to his introduction, a scene where he casually brushed aside the Hulk in a way that immediately communicated that everything the heroes knew about their own ceiling was about to be revised upward. The difference with Doom catching the hammer is that it's more personal. Thanos absorbing the Hulk's assault was a demonstration of raw physical power. Doom stopping Thor's weapon in his palm is something that reads as contempt. He's not straining. He's not surprised. He catches it the way you'd catch a ball thrown too hard by a child, with the slight adjustment of someone who saw it coming and dealt with it. It also happens, apparently, during what sounds like the film's version of Doom presenting himself as a threat, rather than simply being one. Thor is rallying the heroes. He says a miracle is needed, and then Doom demonstrates that he is the problem that would require one. The staging that journalists describe, Doom in full mask for this confrontation specifically, unmasked in earlier scenes, is worth thinking about. The iron mask is what makes him Doom rather than Victor. When he's unmasked, he's a man with a face, an actor you recognise, a human being with a complicated history. The mask removes all of that. It is a symbol of the decision he made to close himself off from the world, to become a force rather than a person. Having him fully masked during the physical confrontation with Thor suggests the film knows the difference. There's a great tradition in superhero films of the shot that demonstrates the villain's power in a way that's both immediate and unexpected. The moment where the audience understands the scale of what the heroes are up against. Loki smashing the Hulk into the floor in the first Avengers film. Thanos punching Thor's head into the floor of the Asgardian ship. These moments work because they're efficient. They don't explain the villain's power, they show it in a way that makes the explanation unnecessary. Doom catching Mjolnir is that moment for this film, and the reports suggest it landed exactly the way it was meant to. After Endgame, Chris Evans said he was finished. Not bitterly, not with any complicated feelings about it. He said he felt that Steve Rogers' story had been told completely, that the ending the character got was the right ending, and that he didn't want to go back to it just for the sake of doing so. He meant this. He said it consistently in interviews for years, and he spent the post-Endgame period making other things. Knives Out, the sequel Glass Onion, other projects that had nothing to do with shields or enhanced serum or anything else, Avengers adjacent. His return was confirmed quietly in December 2025 when one of the 4 Doomsday teasers attached to Avatar, Fire and Ash included Steve Rogers. Just a shot. Just enough to confirm he was in the film. Evans himself said nothing publicly, until CinemaCon, where he stood on a stage next to Robert Downey Jr. and addressed it for the first time. I said I would only come back if there was a real reason, and in Doomsday, there is a very real reason that these heroes need Steve Rogers now. That's a specific kind of statement. It's not, I had a great time working with everyone again, or this was too good an opportunity to pass up. It's a claim about narrative necessity, that the story requires this character, not just that the character is available. Evans is protective of Steve Rogers in a way that some actors aren't about the roles that made them famous. He cares about the integrity of the arc. The fact that he came back means he believes the film justified it. What that reason is exactly, we don't know yet. The plot is kept under wraps, but we can make some reasonable inferences from what we do know. Steve's Endgame ending had him go back in time to live out his life, with Peggy Carter returning as an old man to hand the shield to Sam Wilson. It was a beautiful ending for the character, and also a somewhat ambiguous one. He lived a full life. He grew old. The Steve Rogers who gave Sam the shield was not the Steve Rogers who went back. He was older, quieter, at peace in a way the original never quite managed. And then that Steve died, presumably, at some point between then and now. The Steve Rogers in Doomsday is apparently not the elderly Steve from the lakeside scene. He is, from the trailer description, the Steve we know, the one who can catch Mjolnir, the one who says, "Hey pal," to a stunned Thor. Whether this is a Steve from an alternate timeline, a Steve who returned from the past earlier than he did in the main timeline, a Steve who has been around for years without anyone knowing, these questions are presumably answered in the film itself. What the trailer gives us is the reunion. Thor is in the middle of his rally speech when a voice comes from off-screen. "Hey pal." That's all. 2 words. Thor turns around. He stares. He says, "It's not possible." And Mjolnir leaves his hand and flies past him into Steve's grip. According to Reuters' description of the CinemaCon room, this was the moment that got the biggest reaction of the entire presentation. Bigger than Doom catching the hammer, bigger than the Gambit appearance. The room applauded for the Mjolnir scene. It makes sense. The original Mjolnir moment for Steve was in Endgame. The battlefield, the desperate fight, Thor watching with pure delight as his oldest friend revealed a worthiness that had, apparently, always been there. "I knew it," Thor says in Endgame, with a joy that briefly pierces the darkness of everything else happening around them. This moment echoes that one, but differently. In Endgame, Steve proves something. In Doomsday, the hammer simply goes to him. Because of course it does. Because it already knows him. Thor's shock isn't about whether Steve is worthy. It's about the impossibility of Steve being here at all. It's the hammer as recognition, as greeting, as the universe's way of saying, yes, he's real, yes, he's back. That's the kind of image that takes something from all the films that came before and gives it back to you in a new shape. It only works because of Endgame, and because of the original Thor films, where the worthiness enchantment was first explained, and because of every film in between where Steve Rogers demonstrated, over and over again, the quality that makes the hammer choose him. 17 years of storytelling converging on a voice off screen and a hammer flying sideways. Let's spend some time with the X-Men contingent, because the confirmed cast list for this film is quite remarkable when you lay it out and think about what it represents. Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier, Ian McKellen as Magneto, Rebecca Roman as Mystique, James Marsden as Cyclops, Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler, Kelsey Grammer as Beast, Channing Tatum as Gambit. These are, with one exception, the cast of the Fox X-Men films from 2000 through roughly 2006, the original trilogy and its associated spin-offs. The exception is Tatum, who was attached to a Gambit solo film for years before that project was eventually cancelled. He never got to play the character in an actual released film. Doomsday is apparently finally giving him the role that got away. There's something genuinely touching about that. If you think about it at a remove, Channing Tatum spent the better part of a decade trying to get a Gambit film made. The character is a fan favourite, a charming Cajun card-throwing mutant with a complicated moral past and an on-again, off-again relationship with Rogue that spans decades of comics. The film kept almost happening and then not happening, going through different directors, different scripts, getting shelved when the Fox era ended. And then years later, rather than casting someone fresh in the role, Marvel gave the part to the person who'd been waiting for it. The decision to use these specific actors, rather than recasting, is, as I mentioned when we talked about the trailer's opening, tied to both multiverse logic and a genuine desire to honour what audiences grew up with. Both reasons hold. What's worth adding here is the specific weight of the individual names. McKellen is 86. The idea of him reprising Magneto, a character he's played with consistent intelligence and quiet menace across multiple decades, is not something anyone should take for granted. There's a version of this where Marvel recast the role with a younger actor, and nobody could reasonably have complained. The choice not to do that is a form of respect, both for the actor and for the audience's attachment to his version of the character. In the comics, Magneto is not simply a villain. He's the character whose existence forces the question of what you do with completely legitimate grievances about the world's treatment of your people, when the tactics available to you include extreme force. Eric Lanesher, his original name, a Holocaust survivor in the comics, has every reason to believe that the world will eventually turn against mutants, because the world has turned against people like him before, with catastrophic consequences. His approach to that danger is to act first, to make mutant kind powerful enough that nobody would dare. Professor Xavier's approach is to build a school and try to demonstrate coexistence through example. Neither of them is simply right or simply wrong, and the films have generally honoured that complexity, which is why McKellen's Magneto has always been watchable, even in films where the surrounding material was a bit shaky. Having both Xavier and Magneto in Doomsday raises the question of how they function in relation to the Avengers' response to Doom. Xavier, presumably, is part of the Alliance. His voiceover in the trailer is part of the call to action. But Magneto is less predictable. He has always been someone who evaluates threats on his own terms and reaches his own conclusions about whose side he's on. The presence of Dr. Doom, someone who shares Magneto's fundamental belief that superior beings have both the right and the responsibility to shape the world, creates an interesting dynamic. They would agree on quite a lot, actually. Whether that agreement translates into alliance or something more complicated is presumably part of the story. The trailer's specific X-Men action beat involves Rebecca Romijn's Mystique transforming into Florence Pugh's Yelena Belova, which we'll get to in the next section. Gambit appears fighting Shang-Chi, which is a visually interesting pairing. Two characters whose power sets and combat styles are completely different. The kinetically charged playing card thrower versus the martial artist. Cyclops and Nightcrawler are in the film, but don't appear to have specific confirmed beats in this trailer. What the X-Men's presence in this trailer communicates overall is that Doomsday isn't treating them as a bonus feature. They're woven into the fabric of what's happening. The film opens at their school. They're fighting alongside Avengers and against them, depending on the scene. They're part of the machinery of the crisis rather than bystanders watching it. 25 years is a long time to wait for something to happen. That it's finally happening feels, from the description of that CinemaCon room, like it was worth it. There is a moment in the trailer where Mystique transforms into Yelena Belova, and Florence Pugh finds herself in a fight with someone wearing her own face. It's exactly as funny and as genuinely problematic as it sounds, which is probably deliberate. The trailer apparently got a laugh from the CinemaCon room at that point, but it's also a smart bit of action design. If your opponent becomes you, every instinct you have about how to read a fight is suddenly useless. You know your own tells, you know exactly how to fake them. Rebecca Romijn's Mystique has always been the character in the Fox films with the most interesting tactical possibilities and the least narrative space to explore them. She's a shapeshifter. She can become anyone, look like anyone, sound like anyone, and the films used her primarily as a loyal lieutenant to Magneto rather than as someone with her own agenda. Romijn played her with a particular physical stillness and cold intelligence that made the character compelling even in limited screen time. Choosing Yelena as the specific target of her transformation is interesting. Yelena Belova is the emotional core of the new Avengers. She's Natasha Romanoff's sister, trained the same way, carrying the same complicated history with the Red Room, but approaching it with a different kind of anger. Where Natasha processed her past into competence and control, Yelena processes it into a sort of aggressive self-awareness that's part grief and part very dark comedy. Florence Pugh has made her one of the most watchable characters in the post-Endgame MCU, which is saying something given the competition. The Mystique as Yelena twist also raises a question that the trailer apparently doesn't answer. Is the X-Men team, at some point in this film, working against the Avengers rather than with them? The Gambit versus Shang-Chi fight suggests a period of conflict between the two groups before any alliance forms, which would track with the multiverse logic of the film. The Fox X-Men arriving in the MCU wouldn't necessarily know who to trust or whose side anyone is on. They'd have to figure that out under pressure. Doom, if he's 3 moves ahead as the Russos describe, would presumably benefit from having the Avengers and the X-Men spend time fighting each other instead of him. That's an efficient manipulation. Get the most powerful people in 2 universes to deal with each other while you continue whatever you're actually planning. It has the quality of a Victor Von Doom move. Elegant, terrible, requiring relatively minimal direct effort. The Thunderbolts, now the new Avengers, are the other half of the alliance that's forming, apparently alongside the Fantastic Four. The full new Avengers lineup in Doomsday is Yelena Belova, Bucky Barnes, Sentry, Ghost, Red Guardian, and US Agent. That's a group with a specific flavour: competent, experienced, morally various, and not entirely comfortable being labelled heroes. They're the people who do the difficult jobs that the more famous Avengers are too iconic to handle quietly. Bucky Barnes in particular has one of the quieter but more complete arcs in the franchise, from Hydra assassin to Allied operative to someone who has genuinely processed, or at least begun to process, the things he did while under control. Sebastian Stan has been playing him since 2011, which means he's had as long to develop the character as most of the original Avengers. A Bucky Barnes in a fight alongside Steve Rogers, in a film where Steve has somehow returned. That reunion hasn't been in any trailer beats yet. Marvel is clearly saving it. Sentry is the newest addition, introduced in Thunderbolts as a deeply damaged being of extraordinary power, effectively a Superman-scale entity with severe psychological instability. His inclusion in the new Avengers is itself an act of trust and risk on everyone's part, and his presence in a Doom story is interesting, because Doom has historically been one of the few characters in the comics who knows how to deal with beings of essentially unlimited power. He approaches them as problems to be solved rather than forces to be opposed. Whether that applies here remains to be seen. But the Florence Pugh versus Florence Pugh image is the one that will screenshot well and travel widely once the public trailer drops. And Marvel knew that when they included it. Sometimes the most important function of a single shot in a trailer is to be the thing people share with each other the next morning. And that one has exactly the right quality of surprising delight. The Fantastic Four arriving in the MCU via the Thunderbolts post-credits scene was one of those moments that was both a surprise and completely inevitable. Inevitable because they'd been building toward it for years, because First Steps had established the team as a unit in their own universe, and the ending of that film made clear that the ship crossing over wasn't accidental. Surprising because the actual execution of the moment, the ship appearing, the four figures visible inside it, no fanfare, no explanation, had a simplicity that felt more like a piece of good storytelling than a piece of marketing. In Doomsday, they land. They actually land in the present-day MCU, and they have to deal with what they find there. Pedro Pascal, as Reed Richards, is a casting choice that looks better the more you think about it. Reed in the comics is characterized by two things: an intellect that operates on a scale that removes him slightly from ordinary human interaction, and a deep, genuine love for his family that coexists somewhat uneasily with that intellect. He gets lost in problems. He forgets to be a person while he's being a scientist. His family is what brings him back, repeatedly, to the recognition that the people around him matter as much as the theories. Pascal has built a career on a specific kind of warmth under pressure, characters who carry enormous responsibility with a quiet sadness, who are clearly exhausted but keep going anyway. Din Djarin in The Mandalorian, Joel in The Last of Us, a certain kind of tired, loving, enduring father figure who doesn't make speeches about his commitment but demonstrates it by still being there. That quality maps interestingly onto Reed Richards, who in the comics is endlessly capable but not naturally good at showing how much he cares. The relationship between Reed Richards and Doctor Doom is one of the defining rivalries in Marvel Comics, and its particular quality, the way it's both personal and principled, both about a specific grievance and about a genuine philosophical disagreement about what intelligence obligates you to do, is presumably going to be part of what Doomsday does with both characters. Reed chose openness, collaboration, family. Victor chose sovereignty, isolation, control. They were students together once. The distance between where they each ended up is extraordinary. Whether the MCU version of that dynamic leans more on the personal history or the philosophical contrast is something we'll find out in December, but the trailer's inclusion of the Fantastic Four meeting the new Avengers is a sign that the film is interested in those relationships rather than just treating both teams as a crowd. Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm. In the comics, Sue is one of the most powerful characters in Marvel. Her force fields can function offensively as well as defensively, can be used to implode objects from the inside, can be extended to a scale that makes her objectively more powerful than her husband in many situations, a fact that the comics have periodically acknowledged and that several writers have used very well. She is also, in the best versions of the character, the person who holds the Fantastic Four together emotionally. Not in a passive way, in an active, clear-eyed, sometimes quite direct way. She loves these people, and she will tell them when they're being an idiot, including Reed. Kirby's version in First Steps appears to have leaned into that quality. She is not a supporting character in her own story. Her dynamic with Pascal's Reed has an equality to it that the franchise's earlier Fantastic Four adaptations didn't always manage. Johnny Storm and the Thing round out the family. And there's something about the Thing in particular that I've always found quietly affecting. Ben Grimm is a man who can't take his powers off. He is permanently stone-coloured and stone-textured and enormous. And he has had to make peace with the fact that there's no version of the future where that changes. He grumbles about it. He finds it funny sometimes. He genuinely mourns it other times. The character works best when the films let him do all three of those things in the same breath. And from what I understand of First Steps, they managed it. Dropping all four of them into the MCU mid-crisis, surrounded by people they've never met, facing a villain who may share Reed's nemesis face, or may simply be that nemesis from a different angle. That's an enormously promising setup. The question isn't whether the Fantastic Four will be good value in this film. The question is whether December feels any closer just thinking about it. It doesn't particularly. After Wakanda Forever, Namor sits in a genuinely interesting position. Neither villain redeemed nor ally properly earned. He's a king who agreed to a ceasefire because continued war with Wakanda stopped being tactically useful, which is a meaningfully different thing from changing his mind about anything. And now he's apparently, in Doomsday, fighting alongside Letitia Wright's Shuri. Namor in Wakanda Forever was introduced as the King of Talokan, an underwater civilization drawn from Mesoamerican culture rather than the Atlantis of the comics, and positioned as an antagonist with entirely legitimate grievances. Talokan had remained hidden for centuries to avoid the kind of exploitation they were now watching happen to Wakanda above them. His response, to demand Wakanda's help in eliminating the outside threat, and to wage war when they declined, was extreme, but not irrational. The end of Wakanda Forever left Namor and Wakanda in a position of uneasy truce. He's not an ally exactly. He's a powerful monarch who has agreed, provisionally, that direct conflict with Wakanda isn't in anyone's interest right now. He still has his own agenda. He still has his own people to protect. And he has always operated on the assumption that the surface world has historically been an enemy, which is not an assumption he's given much cause to revise. Letitia Wright's Shuri as Black Panther is a version of the character built on grief and transformation. She is not her brother. She came to the mantle through loss rather than preparation, and Wakanda Forever spent considerable time with what that felt like. The anger of it, the inadequacy, the gradual resistant acceptance. By the time Doomsday arrives, she's been the Black Panther for a while. The question of who she is in that role versus who T'Challa was is presumably one the film is interested in. Wakanda as a geopolitical force is one of the things the MCU has handled interestingly in the post-Endgame years. It is a nation with an army, with extraordinary technology, with resources that the rest of the world has been trying to access for decades. In a film about a threat that requires assembling every possible defender, having Wakanda and Talokan both involved is less about individual hero power and more about the scale of what's being mobilized. These are kingdoms committing to a fight. That's a different order of stakes than a few costumed individuals deciding to help. Magneto's presence in the trailer alongside these characters raises an interesting question about the moral landscape of the film. Namor, Magneto, Doom, three characters who have historically been antagonists, whose grievances are comprehensible, all in the same story. Only one of them appears to be the actual villain of the piece. That leaves the other two in an ambiguous position that could either be narrative richness or narrative overcrowding, depending on how carefully it's handled. The Russo's track record on this kind of moral ambiguity speaks for itself. A film where the question of who's right is genuinely complicated, even as the question of who needs to be stopped is reasonably clear. Shuri and Namor in the same film also completes a specific piece of business from Wakanda Forever. Their relationship there was never resolved into anything simple. He respects her. She is not certain he deserves that respect, and the fact that they're apparently fighting alongside each other in Doomsday suggests that something has moved since that uneasy truce, that the threat is large enough to draw together people who are still working through their recent history, which is, honestly, how most alliances work. You don't have to like someone to fight beside them. You just have to agree on what you're fighting against. The word Doomsday in the film's title is doing quite a lot of work. On the surface level, it's a doom pun. His name is in it. The threat he represents is planetary. But Marvel doesn't usually name their films casually, and the word has specific resonance in comics history that's worth unpacking a bit. The one you really want to know about, if you haven't come across it, is the 2015 Secret Wars event. Jonathan Hickman wrote it, Esad Ribic illustrated it, and it was years in the building. Hickman spent the better part of 4 years laying groundwork in other titles before the main event. The setup is this. The Marvel multiverse is collapsing, universes are dying in incursions, two realities colliding and annihilating each other, and what's left is a single composite world called Battle World, made from fragments of destroyed universes governed by one being, Dr. Doom. In that story, Victor Von Doom acquires the power of the Beyonders, cosmic entities of essentially unlimited power who had been systematically destroying universes, and uses it to create Battleworld as a kind of arc. He saves what he can. He rules it absolutely, with Reed Richards as a subordinate figure, and Sue Storm as his wife, and their children as his children. He has taken the thing he always wanted, supremacy, order, the most capable mind in charge of everything, and made it real. And then, being Victor Von Doom, he finds a reason to let it go. The film won't follow that comic storyline exactly. The MCU never adapts comics directly. It adapts the spirit and the DNA of them. But the structure of a Doom story that involves multiverse collapse, that positions him as someone who believes he can manage the crisis better than anyone else, that puts him in opposition to Reed Richards, while also making him something more complicated than a straightforward villain. That's the architecture Hickman built, and Doomsday appears to be working from it. The two-film structure confirms this. Doomsday is the first part, Secret Wars is the second. The titles alone tell you the shape of the story. Things get bad, and then there's a war about what to do next. The Infinity War/Endgame model, applied to a different kind of crisis with a different kind of antagonist. What makes Doom different from Thanos as a two-part villain is fundamentally the intelligence question. Thanos had a plan, but it was a relatively legible one. Collect the stones, use them to balance the universe, retire to his garden. You could understand it, disagree with it, and stop it by taking the stones away. Doom's plan, if it follows anything like the comics template, is several levels more complex. He doesn't just want to stop something bad from happening. He wants to be the one who controls what replaces it, and he has the capability to execute that plan in ways that the heroes would need to dismantle carefully rather than simply defeat. The invading the multiverse framing in the trailer descriptions gives you a sense of scale without explaining mechanism, which is the right amount to reveal at this stage. You understand that what Doom is attempting is very large and very bad for everyone who isn't Doom. You don't need to understand the precise mechanics of it yet. The film will earn that explanation when it's time. The title Doomsday also carries the sense of finality, an end of something, a point after which things are irreversibly different. In the context of the Multiverse Saga, which has been building since 2021, that finality is appropriate. These two films are designed to close a chapter of the MCU in the way that Infinity War and Endgame closed the Infinity Saga. Something ends, something new begins. The doomsday of it is both doomsday, the day his plan reaches its culmination, and the day of reckoning that has been coming since the branches of the multiverse started fracturing under the weight of everything that happened in Loki's TVA and Strange's Multiverse of Madness. Victor Von Doom, as the inheritor of that chaos, is a genuinely elegant choice when you think about it. Thanos wanted to impose order on a universe he believed was overfull. Doom wants to impose order on a multiverse he believes is ungoverned. Both of them are wrong in the same fundamental way. The solution to chaos is not a single, controlling intelligence, however capable, but Doom's wrongness is more seductive because his capability is more demonstrable. He would, in many specific situations, actually do it better. That's what makes him dangerous. He's not wrong that someone needs to be in charge. He's wrong that it should be him. Robert Downey Jr. played Tony Stark in 11 MCU appearances across 11 years, beginning with Iron Man in 2008 and ending with Avengers Endgame in 2019. That's not a statistic, it's a career within a career, really. Downey had been a celebrated actor long before the MCU, with performances in Chaplin and Wonder Boys and Zodiac that established him as one of the most technically gifted actors of his generation. But the decade before Iron Man had not been easy. He was well known to audiences mainly in the context of a public struggle with addiction that had produced some excellent journalism and not much in the way of consistent work. Iron Man gave him a character whose particular combination of brilliant self-confidence and concealed vulnerability mapped onto something he knew from the inside. And the result was a performance that launched not just a franchise, but a specific kind of superhero film. Tony Stark's voice is a specific thing. The speed of it, the deflection of genuine feeling through jokes and technical jargon, the occasional moment where the deflection fails and something real gets through before he closes it off again. Downey built that over 11 films, and by the time Endgame arrived, the character had accumulated enough history that his final act, the snap, the I am Iron Man, the cost of it, landed with the weight of something genuinely earned. When Marvel announced that he would return as Doctor Doom, the reaction was complicated. Some people were delighted, some people were suspicious. The suspicion came from a reasonable place. Casting the most beloved character's face in the villain role looked from certain angles like a bid for guaranteed attention rather than a genuine creative decision. The skepticism was essentially, is this a good idea or does it just seem like one? The argument for it, which the trailer seems to be making, is that Victor Von Doom is the right character for this particular actor at this particular moment in his career. Tony Stark was a man who spent 10 films learning to be less selfish. Victor Von Doom is a man who chose not to. Both of them are the most capable person in almost any room they enter. One of them used that capability in service of other people, eventually. The other decided that capability itself was justification. That's not the same character. The face is the same. The intelligence behind it is recognizable. But everything Tony Stark grew into over a decade of films, Doctor Doom has either never possessed or consciously discarded. Playing the version of yourself who didn't grow, requires a specific kind of self-awareness and willingness to go to an uncomfortable place. Downey walking on stage at CinemaCon to introduce the footage himself, rather than appearing by video or being mentioned in absentia, was a choice that communicated investment. He's not doing this at a remove, he's back in the room. His quote about the character, shared through Joe Russo's description, is one of the most complex Marvel characters. That's the kind of thing actors say about roles when they've done the work, when they've found the character's inside logic and can operate from within it rather than just describing it from outside. Doom's inside logic, as we've discussed, is the genuine conviction that his intelligence obligates him to be in charge. Finding the place where that conviction lives in your body, where it stops being a mask and starts being a way of moving through a scene. That's the work. And there's one more element to this casting that's worth saying quietly, without overstating it. The MCU spent most of its post-Endgame years without Robert Downey Jr., and that absence was felt. Not constantly, not in every film, but in the overall tone of the franchise. There was a specific confidence and a specific wit and a specific quality of, yes, this is worth your time, that had been anchored partly in Tony Stark, and that the franchise was still searching for a replacement for. Bringing Downey back as a different character, with different values, working against the heroes rather than with them, is a way of acknowledging that absence, while also refusing to simply repeat the past. Tony Stark is gone. Victor Von Doom has arrived. The face is familiar. Everything else is different. Let's just lay out what Marvel is putting on screen for this film, because when you see it all in one place, it's genuinely impressive and slightly preposterous in equal measure. From the original MCU Avengers era, Steve Rogers, Chris Evans, Thor, Chris Hemsworth, Sam Wilson's Captain America, Anthony Mackie, Bucky Barnes, Sebastian Stan, Loki, Tom Hiddleston. From the post-Endgame generation, Shang-Chi, Simu Liu, Yelena Belova, Florence Pugh, Shuri/Black Panther, Letitia Wright, Namor, Tenoch Huerta, Ghost, Red Guardian, US Agent, Sentry. The Fantastic Four, Reed Richards, Pedro Pascal, Sue Storm, Vanessa Kirby, Johnny Storm, The Thing. From the X-Men, Professor Xavier, Patrick Stewart, Magneto, Ian McKellen, Mystique, Rebecca Roman, Cyclops, James Marsden, Nightcrawler, Alan Cumming, Beast, Kelsey Grammer, Gambit, Channing Tatum, and Doctor Doom, Robert Downey Jr., as the opposing force that brings all of them together. This is, by some margin, the largest ensemble cast ever assembled for a single superhero film, possibly for any film in a conventional release format, which is a sentence that sounds like hyperbole but genuinely isn't. The logistics of it alone, shooting schedules, character scenes, making sure everyone has at least one moment that justifies their presence, would be daunting to manage. And the Russos have managed it before, but never at this scale. The question that gets asked every time an ensemble this large is assembled is, how do you make any of it matter? When there are 40 characters sharing screen time, the risk is that each of them gets so little individual attention that the film becomes a spectacle rather than a story. You recognise the names and the faces and the powers, but nobody's actually in it enough to care about. The Russos' answer to this in previous films has been to find the specific emotional pair within the larger group. In Infinity War, the film has Tony Stark and Peter Parker and their surrogate father-son relationship as an emotional anchor. Thor's grief for his people, Gamora's terror of Thanos, who is the only father she's ever known. These small specific emotional truths inside the enormous spectacle were what made the film work. The spectacle was the background, the characters were the foreground. From the trailer, it looks like the same approach is being applied. The specific pairs that the footage apparently foregrounds are Thor and Steve, the reunion, Thor and Doom, the confrontation, Yelena and Mystique, the tactical nightmare, the Fantastic Four, and the New Avengers, the meeting. Each of those is a character-level dynamic rather than a plot-level one. They're about relationships and history and recognition rather than just about who punches who. And there's something worth noting about the pacing of the trailer's reveals. Based on the journalists' descriptions, it apparently doesn't try to show everyone. Loki's beats are being saved. Bucky's individual moments aren't in it. Cyclops and Beast are present, but don't have confirmed specific scenes in this trailer. Marvel has 8 months of marketing between now and December, and they're spacing the reveals deliberately. This is the introduction. There's more to come. For audiences, this is the comfortable side of a very large ensemble. Knowing that the film has got depth it hasn't shown yet, you're seeing enough to be interested. You're not seeing so much that there's nothing left to discover. That's the right relationship to be in with a film at this stage. Curious and reasonably confident, rather than either bored or overwhelmed. Infinity War and Endgame together made close to $5 billion at the global box office. The exhibitors in that Las Vegas room watching this footage would have been doing maths as much as they were enjoying themselves. The maths would look encouraging, and from the creative side, there's something genuinely exciting about the idea of a filmmaker who knows how to handle a crowd of characters, who's proved it multiple times, being given a crowd larger than any they've had before. It's the kind of challenge that either produces a film people talk about for decades, or produces something that collapses under its own weight. From the sound of that room at CinemaCon, the trajectory looks positive. Let's take a longer walk through the post-Endgame years. Not a detailed plot summary of everything, we'd be here until next week, but a relaxed tour of the pieces that matter specifically for Doomsday. The shows and films that built the board that this film is now playing on. WandaVision is worth starting with because it's the best of the Disney Plus series, and because it established something important about what the post-Endgame MCU was going to be doing thematically. Wanda Maximoff grieving the death of Vision at the end of Infinity War unconsciously creates a bubble reality around the town of Westview, New Jersey. She rewrites the town into a sitcom, literally, with sets and audience laughter and a husband who doesn't know he's a construct of her grief. Each episode is a different decade of American television, from the 1950s black and white through the 1970s through the 80s and 90s, and underneath the genre pastiche is a genuinely moving story about the impossibility of letting go. The series revealed Wanda as the Scarlet Witch, a title with enormous significance in Marvel Comics, referring to a being of almost limitless reality warping ability. By the end of WandaVision, and then Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, the story of Wanda Maximoff had become one of the most significant in the franchise, and one of the most tragic. She is not in the confirmed Doomsday cast, which either means she won't be in the film, or means Marvel is keeping her role completely under wraps. Both are plausible. Loki is the other essential series. Season 1 introduced the time variance authority and the concept of the sacred timeline, the single authorized sequence of events that He Who Remains had been maintaining from the end of time to prevent a multiversal war. The revelation that all of history had been managed, that free will had been a controlled illusion, is the kind of thing that has implications for every character who has ever believed they were making their own choices. Season 2 pushed those implications further and ended with a choice that recontextualizes everything. Loki, having exhausted every other option, takes the branches of the multiverse in his hands, literally, physically, using the time-slipping ability he developed over the course of the season, and holds them open. He becomes the tree that supports the roots of all possible timelines. He is still there, presumably, at the end of time, holding everything together, alone. Tom Hiddleston confirmed in Doomsday, what happens when someone pulls Loki away from that task is one of the things I most want the film to address. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier completed Sam Wilson's arc from grieving friend of Steve Rogers to actual Captain America. Anthony Mackie's version of the character brings something different from Steve. Less serenity, more argument, a more confrontational relationship with what America asks of its symbols versus what it provides for its people. Sam as Cap is explicitly political in a way that Steve rarely was, and that quality presumably continues in Doomsday, where he exists in the strange position of holding a title that its previous owner has now returned to wear again. That dynamic, Steve back, Sam holding the shield, hasn't been addressed in any trailer material yet. It's presumably something the film handles carefully, because getting it wrong would undercut both characters. Done right, it could be one of the better things in a film full of good things. Shang-Chi introduced the Ten Rings as a power source with ancient and mysterious origins, and Simu Liu's Shu Shang-Chi as a hero who is still learning what his capabilities actually are. His appearance fighting Gambit in the trailer is one of the more visually interesting matchups, because their power sets are completely different. Gambit's kinetically charged playing cards against Shang-Chi's ring-enhanced combat, and the staging of it presumably has some significance for the Avengers versus X-Men period of the film. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness introduced the concept of incursions. What happens when two universes collide and one or both is destroyed? This is the catastrophe that Doom appears to be either causing or preventing or leveraging, depending on which reading of his plan turns out to be correct. Understanding incursions is helpful context for whatever is being described when the press says Doom is preparing to invade the multiverse, because invading the multiverse, if you're doing it carelessly, causes exactly the kind of cascading dimensional collapse that produces incursions. Whether Doom knows this and doesn't care, or knows this and has a plan for it, or is specifically trying to trigger it, is the shape of the question Doomsday is presumably built around. And then Thunderbolts, the most immediate setup for this film. The emotional core of that series is Sentry, Bob Reynolds, a man with the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns and a psychological condition that splits him into two beings, Sentry and the Void, one an aspiring hero and one a force of destruction. He is stabilized, provisionally, by the team around him and their willingness to believe in him despite the risk. His inclusion in the new Avengers is an act of collective trust. In the comics, Doom has encountered Sentry. He's one of the few characters who understands that beings of near infinite power are problems to be managed rather than allies to be relied upon. That knowledge, if the film gives Doom awareness of Sentry's existence, would be another example of him being 3 moves ahead. He wouldn't be surprised by Sentry. He would have plans for Sentry. He would have plans for all of them. There's as much to say about what the Doomsday trailer apparently withheld as what it included. Marvel has been building a specific kind of patience into this marketing campaign, rolling out information slowly, deliberately, in a way that keeps the conversation going for months, rather than burning through all the best material in a single 3-minute burst. So what's missing? From everything we can tell, Wanda Maximoff is not in any confirmed cast list or trailer beat. The Scarlet Witch, last seen in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, in a story that ended ambiguously enough to leave the door open, is either absent from Doomsday entirely or being protected as a surprise. Given that she is arguably one of the most powerful characters in the MCU, and given the nature of what Doom appears to be doing with the multiverse, her absence from the marketing is conspicuous. Conspicuous absences in Marvel marketing have historically meant one of two things. The character isn't in the film, or the character's role is too significant to reveal yet. Marvel left Bruce Banner out of Infinity War marketing entirely, and then had him show up in the very first scene. Spider-Man is similarly unconfirmed. Tom Holland has not been announced, and nothing in the trailer descriptions mentions him. Again, this could be absence. Or it could be deliberate omission. Peter Parker has a complicated relationship with Tony Stark's legacy, and introducing him into a film that reuses Tony's face for a villain would be a creative moment worth handling carefully. Whether that means his role is being saved as a surprise, or whether the film has made a conscious decision not to include him, isn't clear yet. The specific mechanics of Doom's plan remain entirely unrevealed. The trailer tells us what it is in broad terms. Invading the multiverse, preparing something very large and very bad, but nothing about the how. What does he need? What's he been gathering or building or waiting for? The shape of the plan determines the shape of the hero's response, and keeping it secret keeps every character's role in the story genuinely unknown. You can't predict who matters most to stopping something until you know what that something is. Bucky Barnes's individual moments in the film are being saved. Sebastian Stan is confirmed in the cast and the new Avengers appear in the trailer as a group, but he doesn't appear to have a specific trailer beat. His dynamic with Steve Rogers, if Steve is back and Bucky is very much alive and present in this universe, is presumably something the film has thought carefully about and that Marvel is saving carefully. The two of them have been through almost the entirety of the franchise's history together. Their reunion, if it happens in the film, would land differently than almost any other. Doctor Strange and Ant-Man are in the same boat, Benedict Cumberbatch unconfirmed, Paul Rudd confirmed in the cast list, but without a specific trailer beat. Strange is the character most directly connected to the multiverse mechanics of the MCU, which is possibly why Marvel is saying nothing about him. Obvious inclusions aren't worth marketing, and Scott Lang in a Doom story is a genuinely funny concept. The gap between his cheerful self-deprecation and the scale of what he'd be dealing with is presumably used deliberately somewhere in the film. Both are being saved. Sam Wilson's relationship with the return of Steve Rogers is completely unaddressed in any trailer material. This is almost certainly intentional. The creative challenge of that dynamic, Steve coming back after Sam has been carrying his title, his legacy, his symbol, is one of the most interesting character problems in the film, and resolving it in a few seconds of trailer footage would be both impossible and wasteful. It's being saved for the cinema where it belongs. Let's think through what Doom is probably doing, based on the comics and based on the pieces the MCU has put in place over the last several years, without claiming any of it as confirmed plot. We covered the shape of the comics' Secret Wars earlier, the collapsing multiverse, Doom stepping in where no one else could or would, Battleworld as the result. He doesn't save the multiverse, he replaces it with something he controls. That's the architecture Hickman built, and the MCU version is presumably drawing from it without copying it directly. The multiverse has been fragmenting since Loki Season 1, branches proliferating, timelines destabilizing, the TVA's controlling function compromised. Doctor Strange's trip through the multiverse in Multiverse of Madness demonstrated the scale of what was out there and the cost of navigating it carelessly. The incursion concept was introduced and named explicitly in that film. Doom, who is always 3 moves ahead, has presumably been watching all of this. He understands the multiverse better than the heroes do, because he's been studying it while they've been reacting to immediate crises. His plan to invade the multiverse might be less about conquest in the conventional sense, and more about the kind of structural intervention that the heroes, with their attachment to preserving things as they are, wouldn't be capable of. He might be trying to collapse the branching timelines deliberately, to create the conditions under which he can rebuild something stable. Whether that makes him a villain or a very extreme and unilateral problem solver depends on whether you believe the alternative is sustainable. If the multiverse is going to collapse regardless, which might be what Doom knows and others don't, then the question isn't whether to let it collapse, but who gets to shape what comes next. That's a genuinely interesting moral problem. Not a comfortable one, but interesting. And it's the kind of terrain the Russos have historically been good at. The title Secret Wars, the sequel, tells you what happens after Doomsday's events reach their conclusion. A war. About secrets, presumably, or about the secret of what Doom did and what it cost, and whether the alternative would have been worse. The Infinity War/Endgame model had the first film end in devastating loss, and the second film be about reclaiming what was lost. Doomsday into Secret Wars might follow a different shape, the first film being about the heroes failing to stop Doom's plan, and the second being about living in the world his plan created and dismantling it from within. That's purely speculative, but it's the kind of speculation that the trailer's framing invites. It's deliberately open enough that you can construct several versions of what might be happening, and all of them are interesting. What's less speculative is the Reed-Richards element. Doom and Reed have been rivals since university, and in the comics the most significant version of their relationship is the one in Secret Wars, where Doom has everything he ever wanted: power, order, Sue Storm, and Reed is the person who offers to take it away from him, in a way that requires Doom to make a choice about whether what he wants is the thing itself or the act of having achieved it. That's a question the comics answer in a way that's surprisingly sympathetic to Doom. He makes the right choice, and it costs him everything. If the MCU is building toward anything like that emotional destination across these two films, if the arc is a version of Doom getting what he wants and then deciding to give it back, then Pedro Pascal's Reed Richards is the right person to be on the other side of that moment. He has a particular talent for playing the weight of being right about something when being right about it has already caused damage. And he has the warmth that makes a conversation between adversaries feel like genuine connection rather than just exposition. That's December 2026 territory, all of it. But thinking about it slowly on a quiet evening is a pleasant way to pass the time. Marvel films have a complicated relationship with their own music, and it's worth talking about because Doomsday has the potential to do something particularly interesting with score and sound. The MCU's musical reputation has always been a bit uneven. Alan Silvestri's Avengers theme, that 4-note brass fanfare that first appeared in 2012, is one of the genuinely iconic pieces of superhero film scoring. Right up there with John Williams' Superman and Danny Elfman's original Batman. When it swells during the Avengers Assemble moment in Endgame, it's doing the kind of work that only 12 years of careful emotional investment can produce. You're not just hearing a good melody, you're hearing every film that preceded that moment arriving all at once. But outside of Silvestri's contributions, the MCU has often been criticised for musical conservatism, for scores that support the action competently without distinguishing themselves, that do the job without adding to it. There have been exceptions. Ludwig Göransson's work on Black Panther introduced Afrobeats into superhero scoring in a way that felt genuinely radical, and his Black Panther theme carries the weight of the character in a way that's immediately recognisable, even stripped of picture. Tyler Bates and Henry Jackman have done good work, but overall the franchise has prioritised consistency over personality, and that's been noticed. Doomsday, given its scale, presumably gets Alan Silvestri back. He scored Infinity War and Endgame, and having him for the two-part conclusion to the Multiverse Saga would be the logical choice. If that's the case, the film will have access to every theme he's built for the franchise. The Avengers motif, the Captain America theme, whatever he's developed for the new characters in the intervening years. But Doctor Doom needs his own music, and that's the opportunity. In the comics, Doom has a quality that's very difficult to represent in action film scoring. He is both the source of dread and, at times, the source of something almost like grandeur. He's not simply dark, he has genuine majesty. A Doom theme that's purely threatening would miss the point. One that captures his absolute conviction in his own importance, that has the quality of someone who believes the world is watching and is not wrong about that, would be something distinctive. There's also the X-Men material. The Fox films had Hans Zimmer and John Ottman contributing memorable work, particularly John Ottman's X-Men theme, which ran through the films that Bryan Singer directed and has a kind of melancholy heroism that suits those characters. Whether Doomsday's score incorporates or nods to that existing musical identity is a question worth considering. If Marvel is honouring the Fox era through casting, there's an argument for honouring it musically too. And then there's the Steve Rogers moment. Silvestri wrote a specific theme for Captain America, understated, almost hymn-like, in its original form in the 2011 film, evolving through the Winter Soldier and Civil War into something more complex. The moment Mjolnir flies sideways to Steve's hand is presumably scored carefully. It needs the theme, but it needs it used precisely, arriving at exactly the moment of contact, and not a beat before or after. The same applies to the Thor and Steve reunion more broadly. Two characters, two themes, the point where they cross over and become a single scene again for the first time since 2019. Score can do the heavy lifting in moments like that in ways that dialogue can't, and Silvestri is very good at those moments. For the Doom confrontations, the musical challenge is different. The wrong choice would be to score him like a conventional villain, ominous brass, rising strings, the grammar of cinematic menace. That's what every Doom film has done before, and it misses the character. Doom doesn't need to be made scary, he needs to be made convincing. The music should have the quality of someone who is absolutely certain of what he's doing, not someone lurking in the dark. There's a precedent for this in the franchise. Thanos in Infinity War was scored with restraint. Alan Silvestri gave him music that had weight without being conventionally threatening, that had a kind of sad inevitability to it. The result was a villain who felt genuinely serious rather than just dramatically coded as the bad guy. That approach, applied to Doom, would have a different texture, less inevitable, more deliberate, but the principle is the same. If Alan Silvestri is on the film, and if he's given the creative space to build something that honours both the existing Avengers musical architecture and the new characters arriving into it, Doomsday could be the best scored film in the franchise since Endgame. Which, given that it has Steve Rogers and Thor in the same scene again, with Mjolnir flying between them, well, he already knows exactly what music to write for that. He wrote a version of it once before. Iron Man came out in May 2008. Avengers. Doomsday releases in December 2026. That's 18.5 years from start to where we are right now, and it's worth sitting with that for a moment. Not to feel old, though fair enough if you do, but because the length of it is genuinely unusual as a cultural experience. Serialized storytelling has always existed. Television has run for decades at a time. Book series have gone on for generations. But this specific thing, a connected universe of blockbuster films telling a single overarching story, returning to the same characters across nearly 2 decades while asking the audience to maintain investment across dozens of separate entries. This is new. It's been done before in fragments, but not at this scale, and not with this particular combination of financial ambition and genuine craft. A lot of people who were children when Iron Man came out are adults now. People who saw the first Avengers film at university are approaching middle age. The franchise has been a constant in the background of a significant chunk of people's lives in a way that no single film could be. Not because it was always excellent, it wasn't, but because it was always there, something arriving every few months. New characters, old characters, the ongoing thread of a story that kept promising a conclusion and kept not quite arriving at it. And now it's arriving. These 2 films, Doomsday and Secret Wars, are positioned explicitly as the end of the Multiverse Saga, the second great chapter of the MCU's story. After them, something different begins. What that is exactly isn't announced yet, but the framing of these 2 films as a conclusion is deliberate and real in the way that Endgame was a conclusion. Something closes. The particular pleasure of a long story reaching its end is different from the pleasure of a short one. With a short story, you're following the logic of events toward their natural resolution. With a very long one, you're also carrying all the history, all the earlier versions of the characters, all the moments that meant something along the way, all the promises the story made to you over years, and whether it keeps them. Endgame worked as well as it did partly because it understood this. It wasn't just a good film, it was a good film that knew what it was inheriting. Doomsday is inheriting something larger still. It's inheriting everything Endgame built, plus 6 years of additional story, plus the X-Men films that tens of millions of people grew up with, plus the Fantastic Four, plus a villain who's been waiting for his moment in this universe for 60 years of comics and now finally has someone both willing and able to play him properly. That's a lot to carry. The fact that the Russos are the ones carrying it, rather than a director being brought in fresh, matters. They know the weight of this particular franchise. They've stood at the end of a very large story before and found the emotional truth at the centre of it. The very fact that two words, "Hey pal," from an off-screen voice and a hammer flying sideways, could apparently make a room full of theatre executives applaud, tells you that the weight is there, and the Russos know how to use it. There's a version of this that goes wrong. There always is. An ensemble this large can collapse into spectacle. A villain this complex can be simplified into a device. A returning character can feel like a stunt rather than a story development. These are all risks, and they're real ones. But there's also a version where it goes very right, where every piece that's been placed on the board over 6 years, or 60 if you count the comics, turns out to have been placed with intention. Where Steve Rogers catching a hammer in a dark December cinema feels like the end of a sentence that started a very long time ago. Where Doctor Doom, played by the man who started all of this, turns out to be the right final test for everything the franchise has been trying to say about capability and humility and what you do with power when you have it. That version is the one people are going to cinemas for on the 18th of December. That version is the one the trailer, by all accounts, suggests is genuinely possible. What the CinemaCon room apparently responded to wasn't the spectacle, exactly. It was the feeling of something that had been promised for a long time arriving in a form that didn't disappoint. That's a rarer experience than it should be. Franchises make promises constantly, through trailers and announcements and carefully managed reveals, and most of them get away with breaking those promises because audiences arrive with lowered expectations anyway. When a franchise keeps its promises, when the thing you've been told is coming turns out to be genuinely that thing, the relief of it has its own specific quality. Warm, slightly stunned, grateful, in a way that's a bit embarrassing to admit. That seems to be what happened in that room. And that, honestly, is a good thing to fall asleep thinking about. 8 months away, that's roughly the distance between now and when this film is actually in cinemas. It's roughly 8 months away from now, which in ordinary life is not that long. A summer, an autumn, a few months of work and routine, and gradual seasonal change. In Marvel anticipation time, 8 months is enormous. There's a specific texture to waiting for a very large film when you have enough information to be genuinely interested, but not enough to be satisfied. You turn things over. You look at the cast list again. You read the journalist descriptions of the trailer and try to make them more vivid. You construct a version of the film in your head and then remind yourself that the version in your head is almost certainly wrong in the specific ways that make films better than your imagination of them. The MCU has always been good at the wait, not accidentally. They've developed a specific methodology for parceling out information across a promotional window that manages anticipation carefully. 4 teasers before the full trailer. The full trailer at CinemaCon before the public. A public trailer presumably coming in the next few weeks, attached to something theatrical. Then more trailers, more featurettes, more cast interviews, more trailer reactions, more theories. The information is released slowly enough that there's always something new to think about, but never so much that there's nothing left to discover. For audiences who engage with that cycle, it's part of the experience. The conversation around the film becomes part of the film in a way. The speculation, the theories, the arguments about whether the casting is right and whether the trailer shows too much or not enough, all of it is a form of investment that makes the eventual viewing richer. And Marvel is doing this one right so far. The CinemaCon move is good. It creates a story about the trailer before anyone has seen it, and the story is a good one. The most anticipated villain in franchise history walked on stage, and the room asked for it twice. That travels. The fact that the footage isn't online yet means the description has to do the work, which means people read it and form their own images, which means the public trailer, when it drops, either confirms what they imagined or surprises them, and either outcome is satisfying. The theatrical release also matters more for this film than for almost any in recent memory. Doomsday is the kind of film that only really works at scale. A huge screen, a full room, the collective experience of hundreds of people watching Steve Rogers say, "Hey, pal," and hearing the audience around them react. Films like this are why cinemas exist. They're why the theatre owners in that Las Vegas room are doing the maths they're doing, because they know that whatever the digital release numbers look like, people are going to want to see this one together. There's also the question of whether Endgame will be re-released before December. Disney has confirmed an Endgame re-release in September 2026, a few months before Doomsday. That's an invitation to go back and sit with the previous conclusion before arriving at the next one. For people who saw Endgame in 2019 and haven't revisited it since, a cinema screening in September would be a particular experience. All the things you notice differently, all the seeds that were planted that are about to flower, all the characters whose fate you now know being watched again in the context of what came after. That September viewing and the December viewing bracket, a kind of emotional preparation that I suspect a lot of people are going to undertake, whether consciously or not. The long story asking you to remember where you started before it shows you where it ends. In the meantime, what we have is a profile shot of a green cloak, a hammer flying sideways, an old man at a window watching fire in the sky, 2 words spoken off screen, and a man who thought his friend was gone forever, turning to find him standing there and saying the simplest possible thing. It's not possible, and then watching with something that can only be described as joy, as the hammer proves him wrong. Since we have some time before the public trailer drops and considerably more before the film itself, it might be worth thinking about what's genuinely useful to have in your mind going into Doomsday. Not a homework assignment. Nobody needs to have memorized every Marvel film to enjoy this one, but a few things that would enrich the experience if they were reasonably fresh. The Endgame ending is probably the most important, not the whole film necessarily, though it rewards revisiting. Specifically, Steve Rogers going back in time and living out his life. The conversation between old Steve and Sam Wilson on that bench by the lake. The moment Steve hands Sam the shield. These are the scenes that Doomsday is apparently building on directly. And having them clear in your head means that when Steve says, "Hey pal," off screen and the hammer flies, you understand not just that it's a good moment, but what it costs and what it means. The worthiness scene from Endgame, Steve lifting Mjolnir during the final battle, and Thor's "I knew it" is the other key beat. In that scene, Steve lifts the hammer to fight. In Doomsday, the hammer goes to him as a greeting. The shift in context is everything, and it only reads properly if you remember the original. Loki Season 2's ending is worth knowing, specifically because Tom Hiddleston is confirmed in the cast, and the premise of what he did at the end of that season, holding the multiverse together alone at the end of time, has obvious implications for a film about a multiversal crisis. If you haven't seen it and have 4 hours free at some point before December, the 2 seasons of Loki are some of the best things the MCU has made. And the ending of Season 2 is a genuine gut punch. The Thunderbolts. For the new Avengers context, and particularly for Sentry's introduction. He is a complicated, powerful, unstable character, and understanding who he is before he appears in a film. This large is worth doing. The film works without that knowledge, but it's richer with it. Wakanda Forever, for Shuri and Namor and where that relationship ended. Again, not required. The film stands alone well enough, but if you're the kind of person who notices callbacks and continuity, it adds texture. The Fox X-Men films, in their original form, are worth at least one partial revisit if you haven't seen them recently. The original 2000 film and X2 from 2003 are the ones that established these characters most clearly and gave the actors the most to work with. They're not perfect, some of the effects have dated, and the tone wobbles in places, but Stewart and McKellen were extraordinary in them, and seeing them again before Doomsday would give the Xavier Magneto dynamic its proper weight. And First Steps, the Fantastic Four film, for the obvious reason The Russos have presumably built Doomsday in a way that works for people who haven't seen it, but the relationship between Reed and Sue, the Fantastic Four, as a family unit rather than just a team, the specific emotional register of that universe. These things will be assumed knowledge in Doomsday, and having them as actual knowledge makes the landing clearer. Beyond preparation, though, there's something simpler. The particular pleasure of looking forward to something. It's underrated. The anticipation is its own thing, separate from and genuinely good alongside the eventual experience of the film itself. Knowing that in 8 months there's going to be a very dark cinema and a very large screen, and Steve Rogers saying 2 words and a hammer, that's a pleasant thought to have, sitting quietly somewhere at the end of an evening. The stories we've been following for years aren't finished. There are a few more chapters, and based on everything that CinemaCon room apparently responded to, the people finishing them know what they're doing. That's a good thing to know. One of the things that the original 2012 Avengers film did that's easy to underestimate from this distance is make the team itself feel like a real idea rather than a marketing arrangement. The premise of a shared universe of superheroes had been used in comics for decades. Marvel's publishing history is built on it. Characters crossing over, teams forming, the same world containing Iron Man and Thor, and a man with a shield who fought in the Second World War. But translating that to film required the audience to do something they'd never really been asked to do before. To maintain investment across multiple different films, made by different directors with different tones before they all arrived in the same place together. The fact that it worked, the fact that the 2012 Avengers film made an enormous amount of money and was also genuinely good, was not inevitable. It required every individual film before it to be good enough to create investment in its characters, and it required the first Avengers film to honour that investment rather than simply using it. When the Hulk smashes Loki into the floor and Tony Stark cracks a joke about a lack of a suit, the scene works because you already know both of those characters from their own films. The joke is funnier because you understand its context. The Hulk's satisfaction is more complete because you've seen what he's been carrying. What Doomsday is attempting is the same thing, at a scale that would have seemed implausible in 2008. Not just the Avengers assembled again. The Avengers plus the X-Men, plus the Fantastic Four, plus the Thunderbolts, plus Wakanda, plus Talokan, all in response to a villain played by the actor who played the first Avenger and who is now playing the person who thinks he could do their job better than they can. The Avengers, as an idea, as something separate from any individual character in it, has always been about a specific kind of trust. The trust that the people next to you are capable and that their judgment, while different from yours, is worth something. Steve Rogers and Tony Stark spent the entirety of their shared history not quite getting along and also not quite being able to function without each other. Thor and Banner have almost nothing in common and are both essential. Natasha Romanoff and Clint Barton have a history so long and so weighted that it can be communicated in a single look. That quality, the accumulated weight of relationships under pressure, is what makes the Avengers more than the sum of its parts. And it's what the franchise has been building toward being able to do, again, at full scale. Now the X-Men are in the room. The Fantastic Four are in the room. All the pieces that the old universe never had, plus all the pieces that the new universe has been developing, together for the first time. It's possible to be skeptical of spectacle this large. There are good reasons to be, but it's also possible, and on a quiet evening with the lights off, perhaps easier, to let yourself be pleased by it. To think, a story this long, and it comes down to a hammer and a voice off screen, and a man saying it's not possible as evidence to the contrary flies past his face. Stories don't have to be this long to be worth telling, but when they are this long, and when they're told by people who understand what they've been given, the ending of them is something specific. It has weight that shorter things can't accumulate. It arrives carrying everything that came before it. The end of the year. And that, I think, is a reasonable place to land for tonight. We've been through quite a lot. The CinemaCon room, the green cloak, the Xavier Institute in the early morning, a hammer caught in an iron fist, and the same hammer flying across a room to someone who has been away for a very long time. We've talked about Victor Von Doom the way he deserves to be talked about, which is seriously and with some appreciation for how strange it is that one of the best comic book characters ever created had to wait this long for a proper version of himself on screen. We've talked about the Russo brothers returning with the right co-writers at exactly the right moment, about Pedro Pascal as the specific kind of quiet, burdened genius that Reed Richards requires, about Ian McKellen doing this at 86 with the kind of dignity that should make everyone feel something about the passage of time and what it lets you witness. We've talked about the people making the film and the people in it, and what all of it has been building toward. There are follow-up videos I'd like to do once the public trailer actually drops. A proper frame-by-frame, a closer look at what the confirmed plot details suggest about the film's structure. Maybe a longer piece on Doom's comics history that goes deeper than we had space for tonight. His run in Hickman's New Avengers and the build to Secret Wars is worth hours of its own, and there's a wonderful Hickman arc about Reed Richards that would make excellent sleep viewing in its own right. And obviously, when the film comes out in December, we'll need to sit with it properly afterward. That'll be a different kind of video, a quieter one, the kind you make when you've just seen something that turned out to be worth waiting for. Tonight was specifically about the trailer and the history behind it, where these characters came from, why this particular moment feels significant, what the image of a hammer flying sideways in a dark cinema is going to feel like when it finally happens on the actual screen rather than in your head from a journalist's description. I hope it helped slow things down a bit. That's always what these videos are trying to do. There's enough loud, fast, urgent content about this franchise. What seems to be missing most of the time is the space to just enjoy thinking about it. For now, if you've made it this far without falling asleep, well done, honestly. That was the intention, but it's also a compliment if you didn't. And if you've woken up to this at some point during the night and aren't quite sure where you drifted off, that's completely fine too. The whole thing will be here whenever you want to come back to it. These videos don't expire. Doom will still be catching the hammer in the morning. Take care of yourselves, get some rest, sleep well, and at some point in December, do yourself the favour of treating yourself to the biggest screen you can find. You have earned it. One last thing, completely separately. If you're watching this on a phone in the dark and you genuinely can't get to sleep, put the phone down. The video will still be here. The trailer will still have happened. Doom will still be out there somewhere in green, absolutely certain of himself, with a plan that is already several moves ahead of where anyone else is looking. All of that will be true in the morning too. Close your eyes, let the story settle. There's more of it